Good afternoon. I have to say it's extraordinarily intimidating to show up in Peru and talk about food. I come from a place that looks something like this. Our national dish is not ceviche. It is not pachamanca. We don't have pisco. It's poutine. And for any of you who don't know what poutine is, it is French fries with gravy and cheese. I'm sorry. So today, I'm sharing with you a bit of a narrative around how we're going to feed the future. And my story really starts from home. I grew up in the middle of Canada, which is our agricultural center in Manitoba, and really lived surrounded by farms and food as part of my everyday life. This grain elevator you see up here, which is a place where everyone comes and brings their grain so it can get shipped overseas, was actually designed by my father. And still today, while I drive through the countryside in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, I see the land dotted with these grain elevators that my father helped create. Food is one of the most intimate media in the world, right? When we feed one another, we're creating one another. When I prepare a meal for you, it's becoming your hair, your eyes, your skin, the energy that's used in order to power you through your day-to-day. So when we feed, we're actually creating. And food is something that is very personal to all of us because we all have a history of food. We all use food as a way to share and to engage and to communicate with one another. However, food doesn't stop with us. Everything that we eat impacts the greater world around us. Every bite we take transforms the earth and the environment. In the 1960s, the world was faced with a global food shortage. We were worried that we did not have the ability to feed a rapidly growing population with the food that we had available to us. There were 1 billion people at risk of starvation. Fortunately, we went through what was called the Green Revolution that was led by Norman Borlaug, who was a plant scientist who really decided to focus all his energies and the energies of a lot of other scientists to figure out how we could grow more food. How could we make the land that we have already dedicated to agriculture more productive? And so through the Green Revolution, they developed new varieties of wheat and rice and other crops. And suddenly, we were able to grow more food per acre. We were able to avoid crop damage from wind and from storms because we started growing shorter crops or dwarf crops. We were able to breed new types of grains that were resistant to disease. And suddenly, the land that we had available to us became far more productive. And through these processes, we managed to feed 1 billion people. So for the short term, we solved a huge problem. However, in the longer term, we had very many negative impacts. The onset of the use of chemical fertilizers that had to be put into the ground in order to rapidly grow all this food. We suddenly created new industries and started filling our soils with nitrogen. We required more water in order to grow the same amount of food, or in the same areas of food. And not all the systems that were created previously had the ability to irrigate properly. And fundamentally, we reduced the amount of diversity of the food that we grew. We started limiting the crops that we were putting into the ground so that we could have better control over them. And so, bringing us now from 1970 to where we are today, oddly, the situation hasn't changed that much. We have 800 million people who are at food risk today. And those are both within developing and developed countries. We have 800 million people today who are hungry in a world that produces a surplus of 30% of the food for the population that we have. We have 8 billion people globally today on the earth, and we make enough food for 11 billion, yet we're not able to get that food to the people who need it most. And to add to that, we have another 3 billion people joining us on this earth in the next 20, 30 years. How are we going to feed them while still addressing things like climate change? If we continue on the path that we are on today, there is no way in which we'll meet any of our climate change goals, sheerly because of the amount of new food that needs to be produced. So everything that happened through the Green Revolution was an optimization around abundance. We said, hey, we have this big problem, we don't have enough food, we need to make as much food as possible, and that's exactly what we did. We took the world's greatest minds and we solved this problem in an exponential way. We fed 1 billion people. However, what we've learned is maybe optimizing around one data point isn't the solution, because we've gone too far. We produce lots of food, but we're not necessarily feeding everybody. So what happens when we start to shift what we're optimizing our system around? Right? What if we do a little thought exercise and consider an optimization around sustainability? What happens then? So we see a large global movement today towards eating patterns that move away from animal proteins and shift to plant proteins. And the reasoning behind this is quite sound in a lot of ways. And the thinking is that we use 70% of our arable land globally in order to feed animals. And it's not very efficient, right? So we're growing food in order to feed animals that we then eat as food. This is not a particularly efficient process and does have a lot of impact on the world around us. So we're saying, hey, what does it look like if we start growing plants that have more protein and we start to diversify at minimum our diets around the ways that we ingest protein? But what if we take that a little bit further and we say, hey, actually plant proteins are not the solution to all of our problems. People actually do want to eat meat. And so there's a growing movement around cellular agriculture, or meats that are grown within a laboratory setting, where we're using 50 years of tissue engineering research in order to grow hamburgers and steaks in a laboratory. In many ways, it could be a solution to a lot of problems. Suddenly, we don't need to have all that land feeding animals. Suddenly, we don't need all the water to water those animals. Suddenly, we could potentially make steaks and hamburgers right where we're going to eat them. However, if we're really, really going to optimize around sustainability, this could take us to a dark place. All the research that was done in tissue engineering was predominantly on human tissue. And right now, we're reinventing the wheel, trying to figure out the same problems, except for fish tissue and beef and chicken tissue. If we are truly optimizing around sustainability, maybe we should skip those and just go and make human steaks. But how many people would actually eat a human steak? So when we choose a single data point to optimize around, we actually can go too far and find ourselves in a situation we don't want to be in. We'll explore one more area, that of health. So today we have several different companies who are exploring what personalized produce means. What does it mean to grow food specifically for the individuals who are consuming it, right? What if one individual needs more vitamin B within their diet, another needs vitamin C, or has several micronutrients that they don't have available to them in their daily diets? What happens if suddenly we're able to tailor our produce specifically to those individuals? Right? So both from a physiological need perspective, but also from a taste perspective. Because we know if we grow food differently, under different conditions, we can actually make it sweeter or saltier, or more bitter, or less bitter. So this is kind of this area of personalized produce, right? So suddenly we could address health, right, if that becomes our priority, through technologies such as this. But if we are truly going to optimize around health, where are we going to get that information? Because suddenly that says that we need to understand the physiological state of every individual in our town, our city, our country, and the world in order to understand what nutrients they need. And so there's a lot of work that's been done on this within the defense and health sectors, looking at what it might mean to have devices embedded in us that are continually monitoring our physiological states. But if we do optimize around this, what happens with that information? Are we comfortable giving up that information and centralizing it? Are we comfortable with having our day-to-day physiological state, our health status, available for others to use? This is really the opportunity today for the second green revolution. And it's really about using technology in order to optimize around all of these areas: abundance, sustainability, and health. And this is something that I call the connected green revolution. So where we first focused on transforming our methods of agriculture, now we're looking at how to use technology to facilitate agriculture. And interestingly, the problems are very similar. We're looking to drive exponential growth in the production of food. But in this case, it's not only about volume, it's also about sustainability for the long term and our health. The way I see technology playing into the connected green revolution is through two main areas. One is that of new agriculture. And really that's about reimagining what food is, what are the tools that we use to produce food, and how we bring food to market. And the second area is that around digital empowerment. And that's really looking at how can we use the technologies that are out there and already being built for so many other purposes to facilitate knowledge and information transfer to us when we need it. So we'll dive a little into new agriculture. We talked already about how there's this shift from animal proteins to plant proteins. And this is pretty critical because we do need to reduce the footprint of animal agriculture on the earth. Again, if we continue in the way that we've been going to date, we will not meet our climate change objectives. And so there are many companies that are coming up with new plant-based proteins, and they're studying libraries of plants in order to understand what the properties are of those plants. Right? So how can we replace meat products with plant products? How can we replicate meat products using plant products? And this is a huge opportunity for many agricultural sectors right now, is to figure out what are those crops and how do they best parlay into feeding people. And one of the big ones in North America today is yellow pea protein. We grow yellow peas, and they are used for almost everything you can imagine. Another way we can look towards reducing our animal agriculture footprint is by shifting to the consumption of insect proteins. We know that 2 billion people today already consume insects as part of their daily diet. And the World Health Organization challenged us in order to think, what does it look like to introduce insect protein to more of our world's population? And the reason for this is that insects require far fewer inputs than animals do. So there's less energy needed, less water needed in order to raise the same amounts of protein. The next area in new agriculture is about improving our resource utilization and efficiency. And interestingly, these tools are tools that are relevant on a global scale. So the first is around closed system farming. Closed system farming has really developed in order for us to see how we can be super efficient in the products that we grow and the products that we make. right? So suddenly we can control the exact amounts of energy, all the inputs that are going in, and we know exactly what we're going to get out because it's a closed system. Further, we have the advent and bringing on of drones, robots, and satellites into the farmer's field. And these aren't tools of science fiction. These are being used already right now. And at first, it was the larger farms that were using these tools in order to better investigate their fields, better treat their crops, have more information on what they're growing. But now smaller farmers are being able to access these technologies as well. And the reason why that's critically important for a small farmer is suddenly a small farmer has the ability to not only identify problems in their fields faster, but they also can pinpoint solutions to those problems, right? So I'm not sure how many of us in this room have been on a farm before, but even just a single acre of land can be very different across all of its area. And so if you have a disease in one part of that land, typically a farmer's response is, I'm going to spray all of it. I'm going to treat all of that land, whether that's with a fertilizer, an herbicide, or a pesticide. Suddenly, when we have access to precision farming and intelligent farming, we can identify exactly where those problems are in the field, and we can deliver solutions to them. So the same farmer suddenly is able to send a drone that can then spray exactly those 10 square meters that have the disease. And suddenly that reduces the footprint and the environmental impact of the things that we're growing, but also makes a farmer far able to produce more in every acre of land that they hold. And a third area that's being explored in new agriculture is 3D, is about on-demand production. And so part of that looks at 3D printing, right? So using tools that can actually produce food on demand. So we have all the inputs, whether those are proteins or vitamins or nutrients or micronutrients, whatever those might be, and they print them on demand. Right? And so suddenly you can grow whatever it is that you want to grow right in front of you. It doesn't matter where you are. And the second area, which we talked about, is cellular agriculture. And this is a very, very active field today. We're already successfully making meat in a laboratory. We are successfully making dairy products in a laboratory. And so this is going to beg us to ask those questions. Is this food that we are ready to consume? Particularly if we understand how it transforms the impact of the food that we consume. The next major driver of the connected green revolution is digital empowerment. Within that, we have this area of intelligent farming. What does it mean to have the information you need in order to grow the food that you need to grow as a farmer, right? So again, we can imagine a farmer who holds a small plot of land suddenly can go out into his field. He can see, hey, I have a problem in this corner of my plot. He can take a photo of it, and that photo can be analyzed for whatever's going on. So whether it's an insect invasion, whether it's something like rust that grows on wheat, or a bacterial infection, whatever it is, suddenly a farmer who did not have access to that information before is able to treat that problem. And these are very simple solutions that are being built today. Can you imagine if every small farmer suddenly, with their smartphone, was able to manage their crops? Not only identify the problems, but also drive solutions to those problems. Further, from a more global perspective, as we start using machine learning and artificial intelligence comes online, we'll start being able to be more predictive about what is going on in our agricultural economy. Suddenly, we'll be able to look at patterns and start understanding how crops will perform in different areas. Working with different farmers on farms of all different scales, you learn that they don't necessarily have the information they need to make the decisions they need to make in order to make the most yield possible on the land that they hold. And so if there were a system that were pushing information to the farmer, saying, hey, have you checked for this in your field? Have you considered growing this crop in your field? Suddenly they would be empowered to do better with the land that they have, increase the efficiencies and the yields of the foods that they grow, while reducing the impact of the inputs that they use on their land. When we go further with digital empowerment, we also look at empowerment of the individual. What does it mean for ourselves when we eat? How do we know how the food that we consume impacts us directly? Right? So I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we've gone to a restaurant at some point and we're thinking, hey, I need to eat something healthy. I want to eat something that's going to make me feel good about myself. And so we'll choose a salad or we'll choose a juice. But we have no real understanding of how that salad or that juice is going to transform us. We have no real concept of what it means to eat that food. How does it affect us? And so this is where embedded devices will have a huge impact. Suddenly, us as individuals, if we're able to monitor our physiologies live, we'll be able to make decisions live about the foods that we consume. And again, integrating that with other intelligent technologies, we can be predictive, right? We'll be able to say, hey, if you eat X, you're going to get Y. You'll feel more energy, or you'll get the nutrients that you need right now. And so being able to live in a world where we have on-demand physiological information coming to us can be quite powerful. But again, can also be quite dangerous. So the connected green revolution is really about using technology to optimize around abundance, sustainability, and health. And we have to start seeing how all of these systems will come together in order to feed the next 3 billion people on Earth, but also to provide the food that we need to the individuals who are here today. We looked at all the different pieces coming together, and we see how new forms of agriculture are going to both empower farmers, but also create new types of farmers. Whether it's through cellular agriculture, whether it's through 3D printing, or by bringing technologies down to the individual farmer that will help them make decisions better in their fields. And then we looked at the influence of digital empowerment, and looking again at how information, real access to information, is going to transform the ways we impact the world around us. So the connected green revolution will be feeding the future. And what's most important is that we all need a seat at that table. The technology is only as good as the people creating it. And we all need to have a role in molding it and shaping it and deciding on what it will look like for our futures tomorrow. Thank you very much.